a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Cleveland and a geek.
And welcome to Cleveland Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing. Your wishes, thoughts, and prayers this week. I'll get to that later. I'm John Bonus with Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of AaronGleeman.com.
The Twins return home from a 5-1 road trip, and anybody who listens to the Patreon podcast know we spent a decent amount of time on Monday's episode basically saying it's great that you won 5 out of 6 in Texas and Arizona, but now, unlike other times they've had good stretches like this in the season, you have to avoid backsliding completely from that. And that was made difficult by the fact that they're facing the best team in baseball in the Dodgers. And in fact, we saw they returned with a big old thud and got swept by the Dodgers. 2 competitive games, and then the middle game just got blown out in kind of a bullpen situation. But that means they cross over now. They're officially into the second half of the season. I know in baseball we tend to talk about that with like the All-Star break, but the reality is the All-Star break's like 60-something% of the way through the season. So right now they are 38-44. They've played 1 game of the second half in terms of the schedule, and last year at this time, 40-42. So they're 2 games worse than last year. The feel has been much different. Obviously, last year there was much more. I don't know if optimism is the right word, but higher expectations coming into the season, so that the 40-42 seemed sort of disappointing. What's interesting is because expectations were so low coming into this season, 38-44, which is 2 games worse than last year at this point, is I think perceived, at least by some circles of the fan base and media, I guess, as like, oh, well, that's not that bad.
Right.
But what's interesting about that is, and it's all subjective, so I'm not trying to, there's no correct answer there or anything. But what's interesting about that is, the 2 most prominent projection systems, and we spent a lot of time during the preseason talking about this, Baseball Prospectus and Fangraphs, both on opening day, had the Twins projected for 78 wins and 3rd place in the American League Central. 82 games into a 162-game season, so now crossing over to the second half of the schedule, they are on pace for 75 wins, and they are in 3rd place in the American League Central. So, it's all, not to say the projection systems themselves were the be-all, end-all of what the kind of big picture, especially locally perception of this team. Those are national numbers-based projections and all that.
And nationally, there's been a number of surprises. Like what the 2 teams that were supposed to be above them are below them at this
within
point,
the division. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
But yeah, it's been interesting to sort of, I don't know, there's a little tail wagging the dog element, I think, to the perception of the team. And I think that works both ways. That's worked in past seasons when the expectations have been really high and they've been kind of just okay, and they're viewed as big disappointments. So, like I said, it's all subjective. It's all about kind of where you're headed. But it has been interesting to kind of get the sense from a lot of people, and we see this with like mailbag questions and stuff like that, where they're like, hey, this is a scrappy team. This is a team that no one expected to win. And it's like, oh, yeah, true. I certainly didn't expect them to win, but they are almost precisely right on where everyone expected. And then, as we're going to get to, and we have spent the last couple of Patreon episodes kind of breaking this down further, but not only are they kind of right at where they were expected to be from a wins and losses standpoint so far, even like the individual components of the team are very similar to expectations and or concern levels coming into the season, where it was like, well, everyone thought the bullpen was going to be bad. The bullpen's been even worse than people expected. Everyone thought the defense was going to be bad. The defense has been even worse. We were hoping that the starting pitching could be a strength that would maybe carry an underwhelming rest of the roster into contention. But then they lose Pablo Lopez, then they lose Bailey Ober and Mick Abel and David Festa, and instead the rotation started out pretty solidly in April, but the injuries have just kind of gradually taken a toll to the point that now the rotation is well below average. And so I know people are listening to this and they're going, well, then how the hell are they only 38-44? Not that that's some great record,
right.
But how are they not 10 games worse? The lineup has scored the 2nd most runs in the entire American League. Only the Yankees have scored more runs in the American League than the Minnesota Twins. And we're going to talk about that, like how is that happening later in the show. But that's really been the story: is bullpen's been bad, defense has been bad, starting rotation started out okay, but has really kind of been in a slide here for 6 weeks or so largely because of the injuries. And the lineup, if you look at kind of the overall baseline numbers of batting average, homers, OPS, that sort of thing, they're like in the 4 to 6 range in the 15-team American League, which is solid. But they're number 2 in runs scored, and there's a lot of like that has carried a lot to the extent that they've been carried to 38 and 44. And it's not just that they've scored a lot of runs; they've had like so many explosive games, which we saw on the road trip. They scored 10, they scored 12, whatever. They scored 16, whatever it was.
And it's especially been the case for the last 2 weeks, right? Yeah.
Yes. But overall, they've scored 5 or more runs as a lineup 40 times in 82 games, which is the most in the American League. And 5 runs doesn't guarantee you're going to win. But from an offensive standpoint, that is sort of the barrier for above average. You know, the average team scores 4-something runs per game. If you can consistently be at 5+ and sprinkle in, like we just said, you know, some double-digit games in there, you can make up for quite a bit of other, you know, warts on a roster. And at least that's what we've seen. The bigger question there is that sustainable? But we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. We're going to kind of do a first half review, look ahead to the second half, kind of use yesterday's off day and the fact that they've now crossed the halfway point as a chance to pause and just sort of reset bigger picture for the Twins. But there's a decent amount of kind of news and notes that we wanted to talk about first.
That bigger picture also kind of includes, like, you know, what do we think they're going to end up doing at the trade deadline, or where they're going to be at the trade deadline. Certainly they're in limbo. We talked about this literally 2 weeks ago, where we were kind of like, well, we've got a month until the trade deadline. Now we've got a month until the All-Star break. Let's see if they can get above 500 over that month, kind of get themselves in. They took some steps that direction. Then this week they took some steps back. The perception of this state, you're right in that this team is, you know, pretty close to where they were last year, actually a little bit worse than where they were last year. I think the expectations for this team were much worse, and I think that kind of plays into the perception of this team and what we think they were, you know, where we kind of thought they were going to be going at the trade deadline. It is worth noting, I did take a look at this yesterday. 82 games last year. They're closer to a wild card spot this year than they were last year at this time. And that's partly, and that is the other factor, which, you know, I think you touched on, but it's undoubtedly the case. The American League is just so much worse. Right now, the third wild card team is 3 games under 500. And it's a 4-way tie for that.
By the way, even within the division,
right,
where the Twins are in third place, they're only 4 games out of first place, and the leading teams, Cleveland and Chicago, are, you know, barely above 2 games above 500 or whatever it is. So, yeah, I mean, environment
it makes it very tricky to evaluate them. You know, as we head towards July, like, you know, can you be an under 500 team and still say, you know, we should go for it because we're only 2 games back of the wild card spot or something?
Yeah, I mean,
the sort of thing they're going to have to wrestle with.
I've beaten the horse to death over and over on this. My opinion is no. My opinion is it doesn't matter halfway through the season that a team would be, if it started today, in the playoffs with a sub 500 record, because we know, just based on history and how things tend to go in a 15-team league, that won't be the case. And so the fact that the Twins are, you know, only 2 or 3 games out now, it's like, yeah, but if the Twins don't get to 500, it's not going to matter. And they have plenty of time to do that. They have 80 games left to do that. They only have to be 6 games above 500 during that time. But they haven't been able to do that for more than a week and a half the whole season. And beyond that, they're 11th out of 15 teams right now in the American League. Right. Like, we can talk about, and you're absolutely 100% right, that it's not even the middle class. It's like after 2 teams, the rest of it is just terrible.
Lower middle class, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. And that does open the door a crack. But what it opens the door a crack for the Twins to do is not just play at this level and get into the playoffs. It gives them almost like a longer lifespan, a second life. Right. But you still have to actually play well. You're going to have to get to 500. And the more and more I watch this team, I just have serious doubts about that. I'm sure a lot of people listening feel the same way. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation relative to last year. And you are right that, you know, the payroll is 30 million lower. The expectations are comparably lower. And so I get that part of it. But I also think there's a like a wish fulfillment element of it, like, hey, new manager, new GM,
Sure.
new face of ownership. Like you want it to be different. You want it to be, a new broom sweeps clean, all that stuff. And there are some elements of that, but the reality is this team's not been good.
No.
And I actually wonder if, like, in terms of sustainability or at least building towards the second half, are there ways to get the bullpen and the defense, especially? And I have some Shelton quotes. Actually, I asked him about this a couple days ago. A few questions of like, how does this get better in the second half, or how do you find more consistency? I can read you some of that quote. He started with, by the way, hey, if I knew that, I'd have done it, 2 months ago, which
Right, yes,
fair
right,
enough.
right.
But okay, so we're going to talk about that further in the show as sort of a reset. I wanted to talk about a couple things at the beginning, though. One of which, Byron Buxton. We handled this like for a half hour on the last Patreon. So if you want immediate, more in-depth reactions, again, sign up patreon.com/Gleeman. If you sign up now, you can just stay with us for like $8 through the trade deadline and decide at that point. But anyway, Jeremy Zoll, the GM, on Tuesday held a media session pregame at Target Field, and it was ostensibly what he's done pretty much at the beginning of every homestand, which is appreciated, going through injury updates. He'll literally come with like a giant list and just go through majors, minors, everything, injury updates, which is very much appreciated relative to past years when we had to pester people to get that. But then within that, he took the opportunity with the media assembled, and recording, to say on the record that the Twins have no interest in trading Byron Buxton. They don't anticipate attempting to trade Byron Buxton, that sort of thing. And, we read through the actual quotes and parsed through them on the Patreon side. We don't need to do that. But I do think it's something that the fan base has maybe been waiting for, in terms of someone in a position of authority, Zoll, stepping forward and saying what Buxton has said over and over, which is he's expressed an incredible amount of loyalty to this team at every opportunity for years, whether it's being asked at the trade deadline, whether it's being, interviewed on a big stage at the All-Star game about it. He has been so steadfast in his loyalty to the Twins, even in times when it's like they don't deserve this level of loyalty necessarily.
Right.
And so I hope people get the sense from Buxton, he genuinely loves Minnesota. His family loves it here. And more than that, he wants to be one of those one-team guys. He wants to be one of those guys who spends his entire career in Minnesota. But the reason that this becomes an issue, at least last year and this year, is that the team's bad. And he's 32 years old, and he's got 2 years left on his cheap contract at this point, and it's natural. He's one of the best players in baseball, one of the best outfielders certainly in baseball. And it's natural for teams to start going, well, the Twins kind of stink, and Byron Buxton's amazing. And so, but I also think
so that message wasn't just for the fan base. That message was also for
I think more so than the fan base.
Right.
I'm not saying it wasn't for the fan base,
sure,
but I think it was largely three things from Jeremy Zoll. And I think it was a good decision to do this, by the way, for Zoll. It represents a tangible change from his predecessor, Derek Falvey, who never publicly commented on this sort of trade situation, other than to consistently tell us, I'll take any phone call and listen to any idea about any player at any time. That was always his stance. Yes. And so he used that to avoid, giving these sorts of proclamations. But and so I think it's worthwhile to represent a change from that, because you are a different front office person. But I also think there's no reason not to come out and say at this point, as rumors swirl, that we're not planning to trade Byron Buxton. We have no interest in it. We want him to be here, et cetera, because it's not binding. It's, and I don't mean that in the sense that he's lying. I absolutely think Jeremy Zoll is telling the truth in this moment, but that doesn't mean that things can't change or won't change. Sure. And so even if it's true now, 5 weeks from now, it might not be true. And it might not be true in a couple ways. It might not be true if the Twins struggle even more than they have, in which case they're going to be clear sellers and this stuff is going to be inevitably talked about. It might not be true if Byron Buxton decides, particularly if they play badly, but then also they start trading away Ryan Jeffers, Joe
Sure.
Ryan, Trevor Larnach, the few remaining veteran, let alone star caliber guys that are on this roster. And he's going to be looking around and being like, why do I want to commit to this team for the remaining several years of my career? Now, at this point, he said it, but it's sort of like the Correa situation last year in a way.
Yeah.
Buxton and Correa a lot different. A week before Correa got traded, the messaging was, well, he's got a no trade clause. He's happy here.
I think it was 3 days before. It
Right.
wasn't even a week, right?
And it was during a homestand, by the way. So I
Right.
remember we would interview him, and it would at first it didn't change,
Right.
and the front office would say, well, he's got a no trade clause. Well, it's not an issue. And then there were a couple reports. I think Bob Nightingale, Bobby's dad for the USA Today, reported something about it. And then we went and asked Correa, and Correa said at one point on day 6 of this, well, if Houston was interested, maybe that would be something I'd
Right.
think about. And the moment that happened, the entire landscape of that situation changed. And then, like you said, within like 72 or 96 hours, he was in Houston. I'm not saying that's what's similar about the Buxton situation.
Right.
I genuinely think Buxton wants to stay here, and he's much different in Correa. Correa views Houston the same way Buxton views Minnesota,
Right. Yeah, right.
basically. But what I am saying is this stuff changes. It's not locked in. It's not binding. It's fluid. But ultimately, Byron Buxton has the hammer. I mean, Byron Buxton can just shut it down publicly, privately, whatever, and just say, I'm not accepting a trade, in which case it is a moot point. So,
But what it does is it does reduce the speculation and swirl that surrounds Buxton and
Maybe.
that
We'll see.
surrounds that. I mean,
it might not.
at the very least, it's an attempt to
I think it will
develocitize for decelerate. That's what I guess. Yeah, decelerate.
Develocitize. I like that. I think you're right from a local standpoint.
Oh, I think from a national standpoint,
I
too.
suspect the national people who are speculating about this don't care. They will go full speed ahead. I don't know that Byron Buxton is going to be removed from the trade deadline lists that are coming out.
Sure.
I don't know
mean,
that the
certainly
speculation-
if you're a Yankees reporter, you still want to be able to have that as something to rely on. But
That machine is not based on reality often. It is what it is. I've been involved with that in years past with the Athletic.
but the respected national reporters don't want to be putting something out there that is where they can say, did you see the thing where he said absolutely not, where both of them said absolutely not? Like,
I
that
think
does seem like things.
you're giving them a lot of credit. I'm not saying that's incorrect, but it's a charitable viewpoint of that, I think.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, if you're talking the biggest names in the baseball reporting world, these guys have been doing it for 20, 30 years. They know what I just said, which is
Well,
it's
that's
not
true.
it's not binding.
Not binding. Sure.
This is a situation that can be fluid. I will say, though, I do think, like I said, it was a smart approach for Zoll to take. And it wasn't some big proclamation. I mean, he was talking to a handful of reporters before a game. It doesn't need to be that big of a deal. But I think it was partially for the fans. I think it was partially what you said, which is to sort of attempt to at least throw a little cold water on, from a national level, some of the articles that have started to come out where Buxton's rated the number 2
Sure,
available
right.
player.
Yeah.
And, ESPN had a thing where it was like front offices, people on the hot seat at the trade deadline, and it was all GMs and president of baseball operations and then Tom Pohlad. And so I suspect that probably was read by some people pretty high up in the organization. But I really think this was first and foremost for Byron Buxton's ears. And the reason I say that is that Byron Buxton late last season, during the offseason, and then on the record during spring training, let it be known, or people around him let it be known, that he was not sick of having to answer questions about his loyalty to the Twins. Because if you've ever seen him talk about that, he's not delivering, pat answers. He's speaking from the heart. He means it. But I think he was frustrated that, a Pohlad never came out and said it. Derek Falvey never came out and said it to shut it down. And I think
Right.
he felt like, and he talked about this a little bit during spring training on the record, I think he felt like, why is it always my sole responsibility to address these trade rumors and to try to shut it down? And why doesn't the front office ever do their version of this, which is what Zoll just did?
I'll also suggest there's a little bit of the Prince Leia / Han Solo thing where he says, she says, "I love you," and he says, "I know."
Okay.
And Buxton, time after time is like, I love this organization. I
Right.
love saying I want to stay here. I want this thing to be forever. And the organization's like, we know.
Yeah. And I mean,
but it's not. Hey, no, we also feel the same way. We don't want to leave. We don't Byron Buxton to leave. We have no we're
yeah.
not exploring things. We're not taking phone calls about it. That's fine.
But
the
it's
same
different to think that. It's different even to assume Byron Buxton knows you think that. And sometimes things just need to be said. And so I think it was largely for those ears. I also probably deep down here, I think it was probably for Tom Pohlad's ears too, a little bit. And I don't mean that you need to convince Tom Pohlad that you love him. What I mean is, I suspect Tom Pohlad doesn't love having his name on ESPN as a on the hot seat front office equivalent. And I suspect Tom Pohlad perhaps maybe even nudged Jeremy Zoll, who knows, to say, why are we not kind of coming out here publicly and backing Byron Buxton's loyalty and all that? And so I think you toss all those things in, whatever the recipe is in terms of distributing who it was for and what the purpose was. I think ultimately there's a lot more pros than there are really cons with this. But again, that doesn't mean 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now, it's going to be the same situation. I don't know that this what Zoll said to me at least doesn't make it any more or less likely that Byron Buxton is traded, other than maybe if there was some element of it that you were worried Buxton might just say, well, if they're not even going to speak up on my behalf, maybe I should be traded. But there was no sense that he got to that point, but there was maybe an overall frustration there. So I think it was a smart move. I would just caution fans from going, okay, well, that's over. We got Buxton for the next 2.5 years.
Sure, right.
This is going to be a constant. You need to water this garden constantly. You can't just spray this down with a bucket full of water and come back 2.5 years later. There will be weeds growing.
I mean, even Buxton's quotes about this 2 weeks ago. Buxton's quotes weren't, "I'm going to be in Minnesota forever." Buxton's quotes were, "Don't ask anybody about what's happening except me." Or no, more not even that. It was more, nobody knows whether or not I'm leaving except me. That's it. Like, I'm the one person who's the decision maker on this thing. Nobody knows what's going on in my head, whether I'm happy or if I'm not happy or something. Any speculation you read about me leaving or not leaving the Minnesota Twins is exactly that. It is speculation. It is what is in my head that counts. And that is not quite the same as, I'm going to be here for 2.5 years, right?
Well,
that
he did still say that stuff.
No,
don't get people all worried about that.
No,
he did say the same type of stuff, which he has no desire to leave.
Exactly right.
Sort of. So yeah, I think, but this isn't everyone's first rodeo, and I don't mean with Byron Buxton, but I mean players and teams say all the time, there's no intent. I mean, Correa, literally 12 months ago, right. And so that's all I would caution. I believe Byron Buxton believes this, and I think he ultimately has the say of whether or not he leaves. But I also think, I talked about this in the Patreon, but my situation changed at The Athletic. That 6 months ago, if you'd have said, "Do you ever want to leave The Athletic?" I would have said, "Of course not. It's great. I've been there 7 years. It's a dream job." But the elements of that job changed, and the environment changed, and my overall thoughts about The Athletic changed. And it ceased being the dream job. And so my stance of, I never want to leave because it's a dream job. Well, if it's not a dream job anymore, maybe you want to leave. And I'm not saying it's not a dream job, quote unquote, for Byron Buxton. But Byron Buxton can go be an all-star center fielder for anywhere he wants to be. And he can also be an all-star center fielder for a team that's more competitive than this, or in a state that's his home state, or whatever the case may be. And the Twins are lucky that he has instead steadfastly expressed his loyalty through no trade clauses, through constant quotes about it. But you can push a guy to a breaking point, or even if it's not as nefarious as that, the circumstances around the team can change so that maybe he, like I said, I did, looks around and go, it's not a dream job, but is this a situation that is the same as I thought it would be? Am I receiving the support from a roster standpoint that I expect that can be? So that stuff is fluid. I mean, we like to think it's not, but anybody who's been in any relationship knows stuff can change. So I think Zoll did as much as he could to sort of cool down the situation, or at least show support to Buxton. But we'll see. I mean, the reality is, look, they need to show that they're not going to be sellers.
Right.
I mean, they need to show that they can be light buyers, but first you got to show that you're not going to do another fire sale. And you can say that 6 weeks out, but it's meaningless if the team is not capable of standing on its own 2 feet and walking forward towards 500. And we saw this last year as the hole gets deeper and deeper as you get into July. People can look at the standings and go like, this situation normally leads to trades.
Yes.
And that's why I say that the national media is not going to calm down about this, because the national media doesn't care about the feelings. They just care about what is kind of the normal procedure in this sort of thing. And the reality is, if you're a low payroll team who was bad last year and missed the playoffs the year before that, and now you're 6 games below 500 at the halfway point, and if you get to 10, 12 games below 500, that the reality is
you're trading away your ace, and you're trading away your your potential all-star catcher, blah, blah, blah. Right, yes.
It's in the meantime, Zoll can say that, and I think that is a good choice. But they got to be really careful here not to take Byron Buxton for granted, not to take his loyalty as a forever thing, not to push him and frustrate him to a breaking point. But then even setting aside Byron Buxton specifically, this team has to be better. Because if this team is not better than it has been so far, they are going to sell parts, because that's what teams that are, 10 games below 500 at the deadline do.
I'm not even sure that it's necessarily as simple as, if they're sellers, Buxton's going to want out either. Like,
I agree.
That's not the case, right? But I do think, I mean, I would say this about the organization, whether there's a Byron Buxton situation or whether, you're heading into a trade deadline, or you're facing, record low attendance problems, etc. You just got to continue to try and trend upward. You know what I mean? There has to be something that you can say, we've got this future that we're building towards. You don't have to be, you can get, enthusiasm about a 60-win team if you see a future that is out there, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that we've talked about several times over the last month is we're now approaching we're actually in the second half of the season, but as we approach the second half of the season, and as we started to take a look at we need to look at a core that we are confident in 2027, or like the beginning of a core, or some movement towards developing a core in 2027. Are they moving aggressively towards that? Are they moving towards that at all? And we've seen it on the pitching side, I think, a little bit, at least on the rotation side, but we haven't seen it on the hitting side yet. And I wonder how much those sort of factors also play into Buxton's decision. Like, do I want to personally invest in this organization if this organization isn't personally investing in itself?
Right. And he's been pretty forgiving, if we're being honest.
Right, of course.
Over his career, or especially the last, couple seasons in this season, where a lot of guys who have been very loyal in this situation would be like, you know what, I've been loyal, but come on.
That's enough, right? Yeah.
He's not reached that point, and
yes.
maybe he never will reach that point. And that is a credit to him, but it's something the Twins should not take for granted. And the other thing I'll say, last thing on this is, the tricky part of being roughly 5 weeks out from the trade deadline and starting to have these conversations, not so much about individual players being available, but about the team needing to step up at least a little bit and climb towards 500 and avoid the one step forward, one step back, is that, if I said the trade deadline was tomorrow, what should they be looking to do? Even if you can convince yourself that they should be, light buyers, let's say.
Sure.
Which I think is, iffy, but whatever. Well, I go, well, they could probably use a couple of decent relievers, which has been the case for 7 months now, or 10 months now, right?
12 months. Almost.
Yeah,
12
right.
months.
12 years. But here's the problem with that. To be in a position at the actual trade deadline, which is 5 weeks from now, to realistically view the team in such a way that you go, well, let's try to go lightly buy and get a couple of decent setup men. The bullpen's got to be better for the next 5 weeks to get you to that point. Because if the team is not improved, it's a self-fulfilling thing. And that's why I go back to, we've talked about this endlessly, but like Tom Pollett's whole thing of like, well, if we're in it at the deadline, I'll invest then. It's like, well, but your odds of being in it at the deadline are so much lower because you didn't invest at this stage. So then you get to the deadline and you go, well, I would invest, but we're not really in a position to buy. And it's like, well, okay, but that all stems from not investing during the offseason. So I think the bullpen is a good example. There isn't a single person with the Twins in the fan base for another team that looks at this bullpen and says, it's good to go. You would
Right.
say
I'm
immediately it
super
needs,
excited about the future of this
right.
bullpen. Right. Yeah. Right.
But how do you get to a point where you're going to be able to buy bullpen pieces? Well, it's not 38 and 44 with 80 games to go. It's going to have to be,
Right.
you know, let's say, I don't know, 50, 54 and 54 or something like that a few weeks from now. And I don't know if they can get to that point. Before we get to some other stuff, let's talk about our presenting sponsor. We love them, Blackstack. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we have some sad news to share about them.
Yeah, usually we jump on about talk about Black Stack Brewing and we talk about being big fans of their beer and their tap room and even the company, but the truth is that those things are all a reflection of a person. That person is Cooper Johnson, who was the owner operator of Black Stack Brewing, and we're big fans of Cooper's. And you know, on the surface, it's easy to say, "Well, he's a South Minneapolis guy. He clearly loves the Twins. He's a listener to the podcast." Clearly loved beer, started Brixworth, took over Blackstack when his father passed just 3 years ago. And by itself, all that would make us big fans of Cooper. But there was a deeper level that was apparent when you talked to him that I really loved and admired. And that is just that he's a value-based guy who believes in building and supporting communities. And that's why he was a sponsor of the podcast. That's why Blackstack is a sponsor of the podcast, because he sees this as a way of building a Twins community. Uh, he built a craft beer community. He was a big fan of Minneapolis and working through the Minneapolis community and supporting the Minneapolis community, including during some tough times this winter. Blackstack's community. And above all, he treated community like family. He worked with his family. Blackstack is a family operation. And that includes a new baby that he just had last year when he extended his own family. And Cooper passed away suddenly last weekend. And I can't make sense of it. This world needs more people like Cooper, not fewer. I especially admired how he made a tricky dance look graceful, which was he he dedicated himself to a non-serious industry, but he built something serious, and he did it by taking it seriously. But he never took himself too seriously. And I should just say, as that thing that he built, I'm confident in how it's going to be going forward. I think when Blackstack emerges from this nauseating and concussive blow that they have been dealt, they're going to be in capable hands. Cooper was blessed with a good friend and right-hand man, Safe, who I've worked with even more than Cooper, and shares the same passions as Cooper, and is maybe even a little more detail-oriented than Cooper was. But their story, I think, is also worth noting because they became friends when Cooper was Safe's soccer coach in high school, and I think South High School in Minneapolis. And if you look at the comment section, Instagram, and Blackstack's announcement of Cooper's passing, you're going to find testaments from a lot of people who knew Cooper as the coach of their team or their kids' team and the impact that he had on their lives. But Safe's and Cooper's friendship sort of typifies the Cooper experience. He gave generously, extended the community, cared a lot, invested long term, had serious accomplishments as a result of that, but he wrapped it all inside of family and friendship and fun. And so a lot of people are hurting this week in Blackstack and his family and friends. And so our ask this week is not to stop by your local liquor store. It is that if you knew Cooper, please be generous sharing your memories. And if you did not know Cooper, then please be generous in sharing your sympathies to his family and his friends and the company that he helped found and ran. And while you're at it, if you have a chance, pause and thanks whatever higher powers you believe in for sharing Cooper with us as long as he was around. And we're just going to take a second and pause for a second to do that right now. All right, let's get back to some twin stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
Because Cooper frankly would want us to talk more twin
that's
stuff.
You've obviously gotten to know them a lot better than I have, but we had an episode a couple months ago, I guess, a few months ago, with Phil Miller, that we recorded at Black Stag, and we drank a lot of beer. We had a lot of fun. Cooper and Safe were both there.
Yeah.
We met everybody. They were coming over. They loved Phil. They're, like you said, they're big Twins fans. They're listeners. But like, that was the first time I'd gone there. And like within 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm part of this group, basically. And I think that's kind of what you were expressing. And then the other thing, and you guys heard this if you listened to that episode on the Patreon side, they sent Phil home with like 600 cases of beer. To the point that Phil thought we were like pulling a prank on him or something like that. And that wasn't our doing. That wasn't like, hey, we need you guys to do that. We were literally like recording the show, and Cooper, Safe, or some of their employees would just start like carting over beer and just putting it on the table. And that's kind of getting to what you know, sense of community, the sense of like, hey, I got some beer, I'll give it to you. I got some whatever, I'll give it to you. And so yeah, it stinks. But I don't know what else we can say on that. We'll get to some twin stuff because why not? Okay. Let's talk about the rotation, I guess. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm bad at expressing emotions. I try to avoid it. Okay. Hold on. Reset. Here we go. Okay. It was fun to watch Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting, I've been of the belief for a long time now. I've said this on the podcast. Some people get annoyed when I say it. I think not only is he the greatest baseball player of all time, I think it is not at this point particularly close. And that is coming from someone who thinks Barry Bonds was clearly the best baseball player of all time at that point. But what was interesting in this sweep at the hands of the Dodgers was, whether it was Shelton, whether it was Joe Ryan, whether it was some of the hitters, whatever, they all talk about Ohtani explicitly as being the greatest player of all time. And it's funny that like within the last 3 to 5 years, it's gone from like a somewhat maybe controversial or subjective opinion to the point that like opposing players are just like, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? He's literally the greatest player ever. And no one in the room is like, wait, what? And so I thought that was interesting. The other interesting thing is Joe Ryan was scratched from Tuesday's start with an illness. He was pushed back to Wednesday, which then set up the very fun marquee pitching matchup of Joe Ryan versus Shohei Ohtani. 38,000, whatever it was at Target Field. It was great. It was a great environment. When that happens, and last year it was Joe Ryan versus Paul Skeens in the same situation.
Right, yeah.
When that happens, when there's one of these marquee pitching matchups, it's something the pitchers themselves get asked about. And I've been around for a handful of these, and inevitably, whether it's the pitcher talking about the matchup or the manager, let's say, what they'll say is like, yeah, it's fun to get hyped up for this thing. It'll be fun to have the crowd involved and all that stuff. But ultimately, like, we're not really matched up against each other. Like, I'm not pitching to Paul Skeens. Paul Skeens is not pitching to me.
Except for this one.
What really seemed funny to me is
right.
Shelton started to give that same sort of stock answer in that regard. And even post-game, having faced Ohtani, Joe Ryan started to give the stock answer. And then both of their brains, like 20 seconds into the stock answer of, well, yeah, it's big, but also it's not like I have to face him. They both went, well, actually, I did face him. He did face him.
That's right. Yeah.
He did bat in the series and hit a home run earlier in the series, had a couple of hits. Like, that's what really is amazing. And it was funny from my perspective to be there for Wednesday. I liked being there to watch. And it was like, you've just watched not one of probably the 10 best games of Shohei Ohtani's season. Like, he gave up a few runs early. He didn't hit a homer, etc. And he did something within his context. It's not a remarkable or even above average performance Wednesday against the Twins. And yet he did something that no one really has done in 100 and something years, which is like, throw 6 strong innings, average 100 miles an hour with your fastball, have a couple of hits for a win.
Sure.
Like for him, that's like I was a little off today. I gave up a few runs.
Yeah, that's right.
For literally anybody else except for Babe effing Ruth, 100 and something years ago, no one. That would be the greatest day in the history of their lives, the greatest day in the history of the franchise. Like it's not even something. And so that struck me like that you have to that the players involved and the managers have to adjust their sort of stock answers just because of him. Because yeah, you are facing him. You did have to pitch to him,
Right.
and then also that like you saw from him on a not even that good day from him something you will never maybe see from anybody else ever in baseball history at this point. So that was
Yeah,
remarkable to be there.
that's funny.
Let's see a couple other things rotation wise. We got the second opinion, the initial diagnosis on Mick Abel, who was shut down last weekend. He was going to start Sunday in Arizona, instead got shut down with more elbow problems. They initially said that he had elbow swelling,
Right.
which is a symptom, not a diagnosis,
Right.
which is
Exactly.
I
Right.
thought was kind of
Yep.
odd. We've been covering a lot of guys going on the IL over a lot of years. That was my job for a long time, to write up those transactions, and that is not a diagnosis.
Right.
That is something that comes from whatever
That's
makes
an
the
effect, not a cause.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so they said, well, he's going to go for a second opinion with Dr. Meister in Dallas. They sent his MRI there. He examined him, and it was advised that he undergo arthroscopic surgery on the elbow, which I believe he's either doing like today or has already done. And anytime elbow surgery is obviously not good in any context, but the difference between arthroscopic surgery versus the typical sort of Tommy John, they found no ligament damage,
Right.
which tends to need Tommy John. What the arthroscopic surgery is, and they haven't given that many details other than to say that. They haven't given us a timeline. They
They
haven't
haven't
given
said,
us
"Oh, there's bone chips," or there's
right.
anything like
But
that.
that
We
is
don't know. Right.
my assumption. Typically, the arthroscopic surgeries mid-season like this are to remove a bone chip or to
mean,
sort of.
It can also be sometimes exploratory, like to see better
Well,
what
that's
is
true,
really
too.
in there, right?
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon. It's not totally uncommon that it'll be like, oh, we started this arthroscopic surgery, but instead we decided while we were in there to fix something.
That happened
right?
to Scott Baker many,
Right.
many moons
right.
ago, I believe.
right.
They got in there, so they started digging around. They went, oh, okay, that's not good.
Yep.
So I don't know that that's going to happen. My guess is it's probably a bone chip, a bone spur. Let's hope. That's pretty common. Johan Santana had that once upon a time, and it was just fine. Like it does knock you out,
Right.
but the hope is that it sort of alleviates whatever the problem is. Because the reality is, Abel has missed like 3 months already with what
Right.
was initially thought to be a pretty minor problem, and he keeps ramping up and feeling good, and then like for 3 different times, including last weekend, then gets shut down like on the verge of returning or
Right.
on the verge of going forward. And how many times can you do that until you basically say, well, something else is wrong here.
Right.
So the hope, I think, would be that maybe this solves it. On the other hand, even a best case scenario with an arthroscopic surgery, which is, relatively straightforward, a bone chip or something like that removed, you're going to miss significant time. And so, we haven't gotten a timeline from them. What they said a couple days ago when they announced it was they'll have a timeline once the surgery is completed, which, like you said, makes
Sure.
sense because
Right.
I would not count on seeing him again this season. There's 3 months left in the season, basically. He's already missed over 2 months, almost 3 months at this point. So we'll see. Either way, he's going to miss substantial time. Either way, the bullpen is not, or excuse me, the rotation is not getting him back. Ober is getting somewhat closer to maybe going on a rehab assignment, but he's still likely multiple weeks away from potentially rejoining the rotation. So you're going to have Mike Paredes, I think, in that fifth spot for a while here. And you're also really leaning heavily, not just on Joe Ryan, not just on Taj Bradley,
Right.
but Zebby Matthews,
Right.
Connor Prelip, who has his own workload-related limitations potentially. So
And Mike Paredes.
and Mike Paredes. Yeah, I mean, this rotation
right.
is in a real tricky spot
Right.
where it's already kind of in bad shape. Like I said, the overall numbers have been backsliding since April on the rotation to the point that they're in the mid 20s for overall rankings. But also they can ill afford to lose anybody else at this point because they just do not have any excess depth, basically. But it's a shame because Abel. It's one thing to lose him this season. It's another thing to lose him right after back-to-back
Right.
excellent starts, including one of the better starts I've seen in recent Twins history, 7 shutout innings, 10 strikeouts against the Red Sox. That was the last time he pitched for them. But then also, the whole point of Abel this season was, yeah, he can help now, but also he can sort of show that he's going to
Yeah.
be a building block piece for the rotation. And this doesn't eliminate that by any means, but it certainly makes it a much muddier picture, puts him more in flux.
Yeah, the excitement on Abel wasn't purely based on 2 starts he made in April.
Right.
It was also based on, let's see, he had an incredible spring training where he came out of I don't want to say out of nowhere, but he was not necessarily one of the top 5 guys we probably thought were going to be breaking with the team, and he was so impressive in spring training that he ended up taking over one of those spots to the point by the middle of spring training we're like, I don't know how they can keep this guy off of here.
Right.
And then he ended last year with a real strong outing versus the Phillies as well, versus his ex team. And so, yeah, not only is it a blow in terms of like, I mean, the current situation with the Twins rotation is so dire that it's absolutely going to be any injury to any starter is a blow, right? But also to the other point that we talked about, I think earlier this episode, which is we're looking to see what the core of the next team is going to be.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys that you could take a look at and go, this guy might be pretty important for the 2027, 2028, 2029 seasons.
And this
we
doesn't
get a
mean he
chance to
can't
see him.
be.
No,
But
right.
it's like you don't know.
But
You don't know
one
from
one more thing we've got to wonder about now heading forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Bouncing to the bullpen real quick. Justin Lawrence was DFA'd by the Twins after one of the worst pitching runs I've ever seen in Twins history, and that's saying something. I was legitimately surprised that he got claimed off waivers by the Washington Nationals.
Yeah.
From the Twins' perspective,
Woohoo.
maybe they would have liked to be able to have him clear waivers, remove him from the 40-man roster, and just stash him as bullpen depth at AAA. Who knows? You get him back on track.
Sure.
Maybe he can help the team at some point. But realistically, from the Twins' perspective, or at least from ownership's perspective, by having him claimed off waivers, he had a guaranteed $1.225 million contract, of which the Twins, when they acquired him from the Pirates like a month ago, took on about, I don't know, 800 and something thousand of that, which was notable because they churn through relievers all the time, but most of them don't have more than minimum salaries. This saves them by him being claimed like 650,000, something like that.
Almost 700. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
And so
they really only they hooked that experiment only lasted. Yeah. Only cost them what, $120,000-$150,000, something like that. Yeah.
Might have cost him a game or two also.
Yeah, well, maybe.
But in some agitation, just watching him have no clue where the ball was going. And then also on the bullpen, Marco Raya, who's a 23-year-old prospect, was called up to join the bullpen. He hasn't pitched yet. We talked to him on Wednesday. It was kind of fun. He said that he got the call late the night before. He was like getting ready for bed. And then he told us like he couldn't get to bed after getting the call. But he called all his family, and they got in town from Laredo, Texas, in time to potentially watch Wednesday's game in case he made his major league debut. He didn't end up pitching. Then Thursday's an off day. I don't know what their situation is, if they're going to still be there tonight, hopefully, which would be fun. But yeah, they had to stay in a hotel for a few days if they want to see Marco Raya. But just in general with him, he's a name we've obviously talked about over the years a lot.
Sure.
He was a 4th-round pick in 2020. I would say that Twins officials immediately kind of touted him as a real find in the draft. And, when I'm talking to people about putting together my prospects list, even right away, 2020, 2021, certainly 2022, there were people in the player development side of the Twins being like, bump him up a few spots. And what ended up happening with him, well, I mean, first of all, it seems like he's been a prospect forever.
Right.
He's 23 still.
Right.
There's a,
Yeah,
the
he was out of high
freezer burn-
school, right? Yeah.
and he was young for high school. I think he was like, just turned 17 or something like that. The freezer burn element that we talk about with a lot of players kind of maybe applies to him. But I will also say, like, initially, so he's like, I don't know, having met him, he's like 5'10", maybe. And
Yeah, right.
he's a pretty slight guy. I can only imagine how slight he was 6 or 7 years ago coming out of high school. He must have weighed about as much as my leg, probably. And so with him, he was initially a very promising starter prospect. but they really went out of their way, even to an extreme level within the context of kind of limiting workloads. Like he very rarely pitched more than like 4 innings for years and years coming up through the minors. And then finally he got to like double A and triple A and they kind of let him loose a little to go like 5 innings. But then his control became a real issue. And he struggled, especially with the Saints at triple A last year, got moved to the bullpen. And then this year he made the full-time switch to the bullpen, putting the starter stuff in the rearview mirror. And it was also a struggle initially this year in the bullpen. He had some really ugly outings in April to the point that his overall ERA is still quite bad. I know people probably saw him called up and they're like, this guy's got a 5 ERA at AAA. If you look at his last 3 weeks or so at AAA, he's been used as a 1 inning reliever or a 1+ inning reliever. Really a true kind of setup type of role. He's been pounding the strike zone. He's been getting strikeouts. He's got a low ERA, giving up very little damage, only 2 or 3 walks over the course of, I don't know, a dozen innings or something like that. He's at least put himself in a position to be called up because he's been on the 40-man roster. That's not been the issue. It's just he has to put it together enough to be kind of an option in the revolving door of relievers, and he's gotten to that point now. And the upside is not what it once was as a starter, obviously, but there are definitely still Twins people who believe he can be a setup man and he can be a 7th or 8th inning type of guy, maybe not immediately. And I'm not even that certain that he's going to get that long of a runway right now. It's possible he pitches once and gets sent back down. Who knows? We've seen that before in terms of getting fresh arms. But I think he's a guy, especially as we look ahead to the second half with this bullpen, I want to see more guys like Marco Raya, good or bad, to find out what we got with him, as opposed to these kind of scrap heap veterans. And they have sort of phased that out a little bit. There's still a couple of those spots that I think could be up for grabs, but he's someone to watch, even if the upside or the ceiling with him has changed significantly than it was, 4 or 5 years ago.
He was somebody that I've tried to pay attention to off and on over the last few years. When he started out so poorly this year, I said, well, I'll check in again mid-season with him. When he got called up, I was like, okay, maybe he's kind of figured it out. The problem with him in the past, or with the concern about him, other than his health, which has been a big concern, has been his control. So, for instance, last year, 98 innings pitched, 57 walks.
Right.
So 102 strikeouts, but 57 walks. And 2024 was very similar. Since May 1st, not only has he been good, that particular problem seems to have been solved to a tremendous amount. Since May 1st, 25.2 innings pitched, or 25 2/3 innings pitched, I guess I should say. I think 25 strikeouts? I should just double check this. 25 strikeouts and 2 walks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
We asked him about that. I mean, yeah, that would be enough to get a call up if you were a 35-year-old journeyman.
Yeah.
Let alone a 23-year-old prospect.
And not especially one that had struggled with his control.
Right.
Right.
We asked him about that on Wednesday pregame. He was a good interview. Like, he was very excited. It's always fun. That's one of my favorite parts of this job, honestly, behind the scenes, is like being there for someone's dream coming true. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Not that we play any role as media, but like watching him be in a major league clubhouse for the first time, watching him, by the way, do his first media scrum at his locker in a major league clubhouse.
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's the only moment where they're into doing that, by the way, because it's exciting.
Yes,
the first time, the second time, me and Hayes and Bobby walk up to him, it's like, oh God. But the first time, it's like, hey, this is fun. What he said was, he thinks it's part just sort of natural maturation, getting used to the bullpen, the improved control. He said it's part a few kind of subtle mechanical tweaks that they've made, but then it's also part, and this comes along with going to the bullpen, which will often increase velocity, increase raw stuff. You can shrink down from like a 5 or 6 pitch mix to, let's say, a 3 pitch mix. It kind of simplifies things a little bit. He said it's part just like being convinced in his own stuff to the point that he doesn't have to nibble. He can attack more.
Yeah.
And that is always a big part of shifting to the bullpen. I mean, that's something like Louis Varland talked about.
Yeah.
Just being like having faith in your slightly improved stuff, knowing you don't have to pace yourself. You don't have to go through the lineup multiple times. You just go full speed ahead for 1 inning and make the most of it. So we'll see. I would like to see him get an opportunity now, a real opportunity. I don't necessarily know that that's going to happen, but certainly he's a guy now that is going to be in the mix for the rest of the season as part of the bullpen, revolving door. And he at least, unlike some other guys, it's not inconceivable, but that 2 years from now he's one of their better relievers at least.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, they started switching him to the bullpen late last season.
mhm.
Coming into spring training, he knew that was his role. Definitely did not take in April. In April, he was still just as wild and had real, but apparently something has clicked. So I'm looking forward to seeing it too because I've seen him pitch in St. Paul a little bit and seen him pitch in spring training a little bit, and I mean the confidence to throw strikes was not necessarily there before, and I'm
Yeah,
interested to see
the stuff is
if
there.
that's what changed. Yeah,
I
that's right.
mean, before we get to some other stuff, let's talk about sponsor Hims. You guys have heard us talk about Hims. Here's how Hims works. Whether it's hair loss, ED, weight loss, other sorts of things. If you're thinking, I want to do something about this, uh,
Right.
Hims is the place to go. You can get it easily, inexpensively. They can send it directly to you, so there's no level of, I don't know, embarrassment or just annoyance to have to go somewhere and talk to someone with that. They ship it right to you. It's not some obvious flashing lights for
Right.
your mailman to know what it is.
That's right.
And this one, talking specifically for hair loss. For anybody on YouTube watching the show, they know why they've sponsored this show specifically.
Don't
But
be like John.
yeah, right. Don't end up like the horror story that is John, or the incoming horror story that is Aaron. But yeah, I mean, hair loss, ED, weight loss, all sorts of things, and it can also be sort of, you can choose the method that you like. If you want a serum, a spray, a pill, whatever it is, they can sort of fit what you're most comfortable with the hair loss aspect, and our listeners can get a special deal here. So
Yeah, for simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/Gleeman. That's hims, HIMS.com/Gleeman for your free online visit. hims.com/Gleeman. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride.
uh, sponsored also by
Storyworth.
Storyworth.
That's
And
right.
Storyworth is fun too. This is a longtime sponsor. John has used this personally.
Yes, and
The-
I loved it. I mean, it was one of these things. I gave it to my mom, and then I gave it to my dad, and it definitely. And both of my parents have passed within the last 5 years, uh, and I'm really glad I got to share that with them, or because it gave them an opportunity to share their stories with me. It is not uncommon now, as the essentially sort of the oldest male, I guess the patriarch of the family now, that I'm like, I wish I knew what this was about. I wish I remembered this story. Fortunately, I've got some of that stuff captured because of Storyworth. So here's how Storyworth works. Basically, you sign them up and give it to them as a gift. Every week, Storyworth just sends them a question about their life, and you actually can review those questions. So if it's not appropriate or something, or if you want to just substitute your own question in there, you can do
yeah,
that.
it's like which son, John or Jeff, is your favorite?
Exactly.
It's like, wow, that's a weirdly specific
Exactly.
question.
Very quick. So you can help pick the questions, and then they respond to that. They can write back over an email or the web. They can do a voice recording or even a guided phone call. Okay, so they handle all of that stuff. And then what happens is they gather those, and at the end at the end of the year, they offer you a book which has all of those in there, that you can give them a hard copy book that they can have and that you can have, and to do that. Also, you see their responses as they go along, which means next time you see them, you can say, I was surprised I didn't know that you ever went to Yellowstone and that was your favorite
Right.
trip, that sort of
And
thing. So
it can be like part biography or autobiography, but
Right.
also part like the story of a family.
right, yeah.
And like you said, stuff that you've never had reason to talk about before. It sort of prompts, memories coming back up. It's a good thing to get before stories become harder to remember for your older friends and family. And right now you can save up to $20 if you go to storyworth.com/Gleeman. Again, save up to $20. Storyworth.com/Gleeman. That's STORY, story, and then worth, WORTH. Storyworth.com/Gleeman. Save it up to $20 today.
Couple more news and notes.
Let's see. So it was a rough series for Luke Keeschel defensively.
Yeah.
And now comes word. We've seen like pregame where before the gates open, we're sitting in the press box a lot of times, or sometimes in the dugout watching BP. You can kind of notice sometimes, oh, so and so's getting work at first base, let's say, or so and so. In the case of Luke Keeschel, is getting some work in right field, and we actually saw him briefly play right field for the first time in his major league career during the Arizona series last weekend. And now comes word from Derek Shelton that he was out of the lineup on Wednesday, Keeschel, and he will be getting reps in right field. And it certainly sounds like, I don't know that it'll be tonight or tomorrow, whatever, but it certainly sounds like right field is going to be folded into sort of his defensive usage at this stage. I don't think this means he's being moved permanently off second base. I would expect him to be more bouncing between second base and either right field or left field. I will say, clearly this is in response, at least partly, to the struggles he's had defensively at second base. We saw it last year. Last year, the hope was, well, he's still not fully recovered from elbow surgery, so his arm's pretty weak, et cetera, et cetera. His arm hasn't been much better at all this year, and he's just made a lot of bad plays. He's looked kind of robotic there. It's been a little confusing because he's a good athlete. There's no reason he shouldn't be a pretty good second baseman, even with the deficiencies from the arm strength. But it just hasn't looked that way. He's had some really struggle games recently there. But I'll also say that he has played quite a bit of outfield. He's actually played a decent amount of center field in the minors. He's played some left field in the minors. So it was always part of the potential plan with Keeschel, depending on how he fit at second base initially, that he would be an outfielder. I don't know that right field was necessarily at the top of that list, but also
that's the odd part, right?
Same thing with Austin Martin, who they've been playing quite a bit in right field. That doesn't strike me as a prototypical right fielder either. But Keeschel being in the outfield, I mean, we've talked about this for a year or so of like, they're giving him a chance at second base. If and when it doesn't work out at second base, I thought left field would be the choice. You may still see him in left field, but they're giving him some opportunity in right field. What's interesting within that is on Wednesday, we saw Keeschel out of the lineup, not playing right field, just not playing. And Tristan Gray got the start at second base.
Yes.
But I suspect, it can be sort of simple in that the right fielder over the last month or so, it was Matt Wallner.
Right.
They send him to AAA. As soon as they sent him to AAA, they moved Austin Martin into the regular right field every day. But he struggled so much that he got kind of removed from the everyday role and put back into a platoon role. And then they moved Cody Clemens from first base to right field to partly open up first base for Royce Lewis, because Clemens can play basically anywhere. Well, Clemens' versatility comes into play here, where if you want to continue making Keeschel an everyday player, he can play right field, and you can just put Clemens at second base. Yeah. He's played a ton at second base. Now, I don't know that he's demonstrably better than Keeschel at second base. I suspect he's certainly not worse.
Yeah, right.
But it's more, I think, of a long-term thing of, if we don't think Keeschel's going to be the long-term second baseman, and we think his home might be, at least in large part, in a corner outfield spot, it doesn't so much matter at the top of the list who's actually the superior second baseman for the next 4 weeks, let's say. Right. Let's move Clemens maybe more to second base, put Keeschel more in the outfield. It's also possible you see Keeschel kind of bounce back and forth from second base and the outfield. Righty-lefty situations could come into play there too. But the other reality is this infield is in flux beyond that. I mean, Kalen Culpepper was on the verge of being called up a few weeks ago and then injured his hip, but he's going to be back soon. It may not take him very long to reestablish himself as a call-up option, in which case he's probably taking over shortstop whenever he arrives. Then you got Kreidler and Gray freed up to play elsewhere. Merrick Houston, who might be your long-term best shortstop defensively, just got promoted to Double-A. So by this time next year, he could be an option for the infield. You're still trying to figure out what you want to do with Royce Lewis defensively. Now you're trying to figure out what you want to do with Keeschel defensively. And you're like a month removed from moving your shortstop, Brooks Lee, to third base because he couldn't hack it at shortstop defensively. So this infield, just in general, is in a state of flux now with Lee and Keeschel. But it's only going to get more crowded and more muddy when Culpepper calls up, and then it gets called up, and then a year from now, or maybe less than that, when Merrick Houston gets called up. So they have a lot of flexibility on this team, and that has been a point of emphasis under Falvey, under Baldelli, now under Zoll and Shelton, and that's great. But they need more guys who are actually good at positions.
Yeah,
Do you
right,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
right, yeah.
Like, it's
I mean,
great that Brooks Lee can play anywhere, but if he's not a viable shortstop, it's not as great. It's
Right.
great that Luke Keishel can play second or left field or center field or right. But if he's a butcher at second base and he's really a right fielder, you need to kind of move on and get on with what they actually can play. It's a theoretical flexibility versus an actual utility. And I think there's been a disconnect there with the Twins for several years.
Shelton has been trying to figure out sort of what the infield defense is going to look like since the beginning. I mean, even in spring training, he kind of talked about, he's got to get to know these guys and see what's going on. Well, I mean, we've seen what's been going on. The defense in the field has been
it took them
about as brutal as we expected it to be.
It took them 6 weeks to want to move Brooks Lee away from shortstop,
right?
And it took them about another month from that to want to move Luke Keishel off of second base.
That's right. I think Brooks Lee at third base is better than Brooks Lee at shortstop. I think Royce Lewis at first base is better. I mean, not that Royce Lewis was necessarily bad at third base, but he's better at whoever else was playing first base, etc. I think this is, we still have. Well, I think Kreidler at shortstop, as getting more and more time at shortstop, is better than whatever they had at shortstop prior to that. They gave obviously Lee had the first shot at it, and frankly Tristan Gray had a bunch of time there as well. So that's yet one more improvement. And the one that's obviously kind of sticking out there is Keishel. Now I'm kind of with you in that. I don't know if Keishel and Clemens are both going to be in the lineup one way or the other. And, versus, I guess, specifically right-handed pitching. And, one's going to be in second base and one's going to be in right field. I'm not sure which defensive alignment works out best overall. Like, I'm not sure Clemens is any better at second base than Keishel is.
He can't be worse, honestly.
Well, I mean, honestly, Keishel
he's been pretty bad.
To the point where it's been pretty bad, right? So if the whole point is like, this gives us an opportunity at the very least to start getting Keishel some reps in right field to the point where he gets a little bit more comfortable with it. We can get similar to putting Austin Martin out there every day for, a month and a half, get us better sense of what they can do or what they cannot do out there at that, at the major league level. Sure. Let's do that for a while. But I think you're right. Like ultimately what I want to see at this point, some point is let's get Culpepper up here. Let's see, see if he can handle the shortstop position. That's the one we really care about. Put Kreidler back into a great utility role, etc. And then we'll figure out second base as we go along. Because the other problem with this is we've got yet one more person who can play a corner outfield spot.
Yes.
Just when we're already have way too many people who we want to see play a corner outfield spot.
Yes, and you have Larnach and Clemens, who have been playing the corner outfield, but now at AAA, now you have a healthy Walker Jenkins back, you have a healthy Alan Roden back, and you have Matt Wallner heating up a little bit at AAA, and you have Gabriel Gonzalez, who's been very good over the last month or so. So that's kind of why I wonder if Keishel's destined to be in kind of a bounce around role. And he needs to hit better either way to be in that bounce around. But sending him to right field doesn't necessarily solve anything, because also Emmanuel Rodriguez at some point is going to be back this season too. Like they're not lacking in long-term options in the corner outfield spots, whether it's Keishel or elsewhere. But
you also have, on top of that, you've also got like Keishel and Austin Martin, for that matter, are both don't love their arm enough to really put them in right field. Generally, you want a right fielder with a pretty strong arm. It makes a lot more sense in left field, but left field's being held down completely by Trevor Larnach because they don't want to move him around, and they shouldn't, because he's actually one of the guys that's hitting, which we'll be talking about here soon, I guess. So
So that was a lot of news and notes. We also wanted to spend the last section of the show, because it is kind of a place to pause here at the 82 game mark at the halfway point, just kind of state of the team type of thing. And we talked about this a little at the beginning. 38-44, they're on pace for 75 wins, roughly a little bit lower than they were projected. It's a little higher than their over-under. They have playoff odds somewhere around 20% right now, which seems about right to me. I think, like I said, they're only a couple games out of a playoff spot, but they're also 11th in a 15-team league with 6 playoff spots available. So it's not just how many games you're out of a playoff spot, it's how many teams you will have to surpass or hold off, because that means there are at least 4 other teams who are even fewer games from a playoff spot who are in front of you. So but also breaking it down into kind of the component parts. That's what's been interesting to me about this season is like how little they've strayed from expectations, like in different sections of the team, right? So the pitching staff overall for the season is number 28 out of 30 in ERA, the whole pitching staff, and number 25 out of 30 in win probability added. That's really bad.
Yeah.
Within that, the rotation, which was the only real hope they had to have a real kind of league-wide strength. I mean, any team has strengths, right, relative to the team, but that's not as valuable or important to me. The real strength is relative to the league, right? I mean, the worst team in the world has a strength on that
Right.
team, but if they're the worst in the league, it doesn't matter. So starting pitching was supposed to be the strength, and we'll just never know if it would have been because they lost Pablo Lopez immediately. They've never gotten David Festa healthy. Bailey Ober's going to end up missing over a month. Taj Bradley missed a few weeks, and now Mick Abel might end up missing the final 5 months of the season, something like that. They've never really had a chance to show what the collection of what they thought was not only high-end talent but depth in spring training or coming into spring training. We'll never get a chance to know what that is, unfortunately. I mean, literally day one, they lost Lopez, and the injuries have only mounted from there. But what I will say is, after a pretty good April, they've really kind of deteriorated, which matches all the injuries. I mean, they just can't keep up with the injuries. It's what you thought of as the rotation when you have Mike Paredes in your fifth spot and Prelip is it's just not, it doesn't matter what you thought because it's not the reality that you're dealing with. And so now overall, despite a pretty good April, their overall rotation numbers out of 30 teams, number 22 in ERA and number 25 in win probability added. So well above average or below average.
Yeah. Of the, 6 games they're under 500, you can attribute 5 of them to the starting rotation.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
But then also, so that's been much worse than hoped or anticipated. I'm not saying it's a mystery as to why that is. Injuries are why that is, but it's the reality. But then you have the bullpen, which I thought everyone thought the bullpen was going to be bad because they blew it up at the deadline. They did nothing to reinvest in it. You know, you had Liam Hendricks and Chafin and those guys competing for spots. Everyone thought the bullpen was going to be bad. We discussed a lot where I was like, I think it might be like horrible, like legitimately horrible. I was right, but also I might have overestimated how decent they'd be. Because right now the bullpen is dead last in all of Major League Baseball in ERA. Yeah. They are the only team in the American League with an ERA above 5, and they're at like 530 something. And they are number 28 in win probability added, which kind of measures the context for that, the kind of the actual effect on wins and losses. In other words, giving up a grand slam in a blowout is going to hurt your ERA a lot, but it doesn't really affect the wins and losses. Giving up a single to score a run in the 10th inning affects wins and losses more than that. So you look overall, and it's like the bullpen was supposed to be really bad, and it's been probably at least 1 degree of magnitude worse than that. The rotation was supposed to be at least decent, and there was some hope that it could be the strength. And it has instead been bottom third of the league, especially of late. It's really been struggling. And so, yeah, that adds up to number 28 in ERA for a pitching staff that is increasingly just sort of throwing stuff against the wall to try to see what fits. But I will also say, not in defense of the pitching staff, no pun intended, they have not been helped by this defense at all.
By the defense. Of the
mean,
right.
You give this pitching staff an average fielding group behind them, and they're still going to be really bad. Okay, I'm not delusional on that. But with this defense behind them, and especially this infield behind them, like we've talked about, they just had no shot at competence whatsoever. And that gives you another path towards improvement. In other words, you move Lee off shortstop, you move Keishel off second base, you bring up, let's say, Culpepper, whatever it is. It's not that hard to improve the defense, and they have made some moves in that regard. Lee, Keishel, they demoted Wallner, who was one of their worst defenders early on in the season in right field. They've made some strides to at least eliminate the worst aspects of the defense, but they haven't yet sort of brought in higher level guys. Because I think that would be Culpepper, Walker Jenkins, Rodin, kind of the AAA contingent. I think it would require to do that. So again, at the beginning, you go, well, how are they 22nd in ERA for the starters, dead last in ERA for the relievers, one of the worst defenses. Why is this team not the worst team in the American League? Well, they've scored a crap load of runs.
Yep.
And that it can be as simple as that. What I will say about that is it's almost entirely like the extra kind of runs they've scored, which I figure to be about 30 extra runs compared to like their baseline numbers, batting average, OPS, that sort of thing. They've scored about 30 something more runs than you would kind of anticipate just based on their baseline numbers.
Okay.
Some of that is because the opposing defenses have been so bad against them all season, which matches the eye test, match the metrics on that. We talked about that, I think, last month. But the real reason for it is they've just been hitting out of their minds with runners in scoring position.
Yes.
They lead all of Major League Baseball in batting average and OPS with runners in scoring position. And that is not something we've seen from a lot of Twins teams in recent years. And so if you're kind of an average-ish or slightly better overall offense, but you are just on fire with runners in scoring position, you will score a lot of quote unquote extra runs because those are the sort of bulk run scoring opportunities with a couple guys on base. They've been great with the bases loaded. Those are the chances to really cash in opportunities and to sort of change games. And we've seen that where they'll just be sort of coasting along, close game. Oh, they scored 6 runs in the 5th inning. And it's like, well, the pitching wasn't great, but they got through offensively to score. And so on one hand, that saved their ass. That saved them from being 10 games below 500. On the other hand, I don't know that you can count on that really to any regard because the funny thing is they're hitting 290 with runners in scoring position. With the bases empty, they're hitting 225.
Right.
That's not a choice that they've made to just be amazing with runners in scoring position.
Right.
And over a big enough sample, you would expect the overall hitting numbers and the runners in scoring position numbers to at least resemble one another.
Right.
And the Twins are like 50, 70 points above that. So you don't have to give back those runs and those wins that have come from the great runners in scoring position work, but it's not necessarily a predictive thing for the remaining 80 games.
Right. And when you say you would expect that, we don't mean like, normally people would expect that. No, the reality is that statistically, you're much more likely to be hitting the second half of the season with runners in scoring position, similar to what you're hitting overall, than you are to be hitting what you did with runners in scoring position for the first half of the season. It's not an indicator that you're just really good at hitting with runners in scoring position.
Right. We would like that to be the case.
Right.
But it's not really the case.
Right. That's right.
And the funny part within that is Buxton's been horrible with runners in scoring position.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
but then you can even use that to show the unpredictable nature of it because Buxton hit 320 with runners in scoring position last year. Did he forget how to do that within a lineup that is otherwise thriving with runners in scoring position? No. So, but I will also say, yes, they're hit 290. That's probably not going to continue. They're not any more or less likely to hit 290 because they've already done it. It's not like you're going to regress that you would expect them to now hit 160 to finish the year at an overall mark. It's just like you're starting clean.
Right.
That what you've done previously is not really indicative
if you hit 240 overall, you're likely to hit 240 with runners in scoring position, whether you hit 290 or you're not you're not necessarily going to hit 190, right?
So that's something to keep in mind. I would expect them to be less efficient at run scoring for the second half of the season.
Sure.
But I would also expect them to be not nearly as bad defensively for the reasons we've discussed. And I do think while I'm worried about the rotation, I weirdly have a little bit of faith now in the bullpen.
Sure.
Just because you've had like Gomez step up a little. Bond has been a little bit better.
Right.
Morris looks pretty solid. Rojas may be joining the mix. Like you at least now have some stuff to grab hold of.
Right.
As opposed to just the absolute pure chaos that they have in April, where it was just a bunch of 35-year-old guys throwing 89 miles an hour and just had no idea where it was going.
Even this offseason, when we were taking a look at the bullpen, the concern was more April and May than it was, this organization, despite how much they want, they really like to lean into, we can build a bullpen. I do have some faith in them to build a bullpen throughout the year, right? And so as a result of that, yes, I would expect. Also, there's just, progression to the mean, regression to the mean.
Right.
It
can't get worse.
We expect the hitting to probably level out a little bit. We should probably expect the pitching to level up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So before we finish up with making our sort of some first half picks here, MVP stuff and biggest disappointments, let's talk about a new sponsor that is very familiar to me, having grown up in Highland Park in St. Paul as a sports obsessed 90s era child.
Yes.
Which is Played Against Sports St. Paul, which is right on Snelling Avenue in St. Paul. They've been around since 1993. You can do the math on that. I was 10 in 1993. So my whole upbringing was built around, as a person from a family who didn't have a lot of money. I was constantly going to Play It Against Sports in St. Paul looking for a TPX bat or a new glove
Yeah, that's right.
or, some cleats that could be worn even, for a guy who's gone up 2 sizes in shoes or something like that. I wasn't able to go to the store and just buy something brand new.
That's
I
right.
either had to trade with my friends for stuff or go to Play It Against Sports on Snelling Avenue.
Or trade your stuff with Play Against
Yes,
Sports, because
I did
they
that
also
for sure.
you can they will buy your used sporting goods for cash or store credit, and it includes every sport: baseball, softball, golf, tennis. You want to take up pickleball? Stop by Play Against Sports. Disc golf, hockey, football, downhill skiing, snowboarding, Nordic skiing, bikes, and more. You can find all of that at Play It Against Sports, and on top of that, it's environmentally responsible. You're not just throwing away, buying stuff
Yeah,
and throwing it
true.
away. They've got it's cost effective, and it's an environmentally sustainable model. So you can save money. You can clean out your garage. You can go easy on the landfills all at once with Play It Against Sports. And also, they are locally owned, 100%. They are operated by brothers who are Patreon subscribers to Gleeman and the Geek.
And that's what really matters, isn't it? That they subscribe to the Patreon podcast.
We've talked a lot about building community already on this podcast. Well, they are part of our community, both geographically and also just in terms of their interest. So we'd encourage you to try out Play It Against Sports, especially the one on St. Paul and Snelling Avenue, which is where these brothers own. Mention the podcast, and they'll take 10% off any purchase and 40% off new baseball gear, but only until July 6th. Clock is ticking, folks. That's like 10 days away. Again, mention the podcast, Gleeman and the Geek podcast, and take 10% off any purchase or 40% off new baseball gear until July 6th. Only valid at the St. Paul and Chaska. They own 2 locations. St. Paul and Chaska locations.
Yeah, go there, Play It Again, St. Paul, right on Snelling Avenue. Who knows? You might find a starter jacket or a glove owned by me in 1997 or something like that. Who knows?
That's right.
So Play It Against Sports. And then also sponsoring the show is Gusto.
Yeah, Gusto is, if you are somebody who is wrestling with businesses, and Aaron Gleeman is now somebody who is going to have to wrestle with a business.
I'm now a businessman. Yeah.
I would recommend that you check out Gusto. Gusto is just an online payroll and benefit software built for small businesses. It's all in one. It's remote friendly, so you don't have to be at your PC. You can be traveling and stuff while you handle it, and it's incredibly easy to use. So you can pay, hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. It includes automatic payroll tax filing, simple direct deposits, health benefits, commuter benefits, workers' comp, 401k, you name it. These software packages can be such a pain in the butt, and Gusto makes it all easy. And it also makes it all affordable, because you can get unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, no hidden fees, no surprises, no, you've got to upgrade this, you got to upgrade that, this is an extra $80 a month. You don't have any of that stuff. You can save time, built-in automated tools, offer letters, onboarding docs, direct deposit, more. Direct access to certified HR experts to help support you through any tough HR situation as well. And it's quick and easy and simple to switch to Gusto. You just transfer your existing data and get up and running fast. Plus, don't pay a cent until you run your first payroll. They rank number 1 on G2's highest satisfaction products list for 2026, and they're trusted already by over 400,000 small businesses. So try Gusto today. Gusto.com/Gleeman, Gusto, Gusto.com/Gleeman, and you'll get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll at Gusto.com/Gleeman. One more time, Gusto.com/Gleeman.
Okay. Let's finish up with some kind of first half review type of stuff. So
Sure.
I told John to prepare his top 5 MVP ballot for the Twins. You may have a different view of this, but for me, 1-2 is easy, or 2-1 is easy. The top 2 is easy. They got 2 guys who are probably going to be all-stars.
I'm not sure which way I would. I debated a little bit on which way to go with it. I'll see which way you went on it, but yes, obviously 1 to 2 are pretty straightforward.
Buxton's going to be an all-star, might end
I
up
I
being a
actually
starting all-star,
yeah.
and Joe Ryan is absolutely deserving of his second straight all-star appearance. Those two have been among the best outfielders in baseball and among the best starting pitchers in baseball. They've been consistently good for large chunks of the season. Buxton's tied for the American League lead in homers. Joe Ryan's got his typical, low 3 ERA and almost 100 innings so far. They've been excellent, both of them. I would expect both of them to be in the
Yeah.
All-Star game, and certainly they're the two most valuable players on a 38 and 44 team. I probably would say Buxton 1, Ryan 2. I wouldn't disagree if someone thought it was Ryan 1, Buxton 2. I mean,
Sure.
realistically, it's 1A and 1B at that point. They've both been pretty similar in terms of being worth around 3 wins above replacement, that sort of thing. But I mean, I'm assuming you agree with that.
I
But
do. I do. Yeah. The big debate me was which one's one and which one's number two. I went Ryan number one and Buxton number two,
yeah,
but whatever.
but then like I
I
guess
actually thought three was fairly simple too.
I don't think of that at all because
Okay.
I don't have no clue who 3 would be.
Okay.
I'm sure you have some crazy idea. 3 is like Cody Lawrison or something like that. That's a John Bonus type of approach. So we'll see. But I think this speaks to the frustration of the first half, 38 and 44, the lack of consistency. Every time they take a step forward, they take a step back. I think a lot of that has been due to injuries. I think a lot of that has been just talent deficient aspects of the roster, the bullpen, the defense, all that stuff. I also think they just haven't had a third player step up really in a meaningful way, consistently at least. And, if you look at the lineup, there's like almost no one else who's even been an above average hitter. Jeffers was. If Jeffers
Yes.
were even remotely healthy, he'd be the easy choice for number 3 or even number 2, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that was.
But he's
why
been out for a month already.
That's why he was my choice for number three.
I mean,
I
that's
would
fair.
I would have put him in the 1, 2, 3 things. And I think, yes, agreed. Like he's been out of sight, out of mind now for a month, right? But you take a look at the quantitative stats, whether the quantitative advanced stats like WAR or WPA or something, he still does pretty well in those, even given the fact that he's only been around for 2/3 of the season as opposed to the full season. So for me, he was my number 3 pick.
The problem there is he's played 37 out of the 82 games.
That's right.
Like, and he's literally not played for over a month now. So,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, he was great. He was on track to be an all-star as well. And I'm not taking away from how good he was. I mean, he was excellent.
Right.
They would have 3 all-stars maybe right now if he stayed healthy and on track. But it's hard with a guy who's played fewer than half the games
I understand.
to be like, and I don't argue that maybe he's third, but I guess what I'm saying is it's not an obvious one to me where like, well, it's got to be Jeffers. It's like, well, he's played, 37 games. And I think that speaks to the team as a whole where, yeah, it's great to have 2 star level guys playing at the top of their games in Buxton and Ryan, but like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those are not at a level that a contending team has. And, I think that's the lack of depth. That's the lack of spending on depth. That's the injuries, all sorts of factors. But I could probably come up, I could think of probably 10 different guys that I would be willing to hear arguments for anywhere in like the 3 to 10 range of team MVP. And I'm talking, you mentioned Jeffers, Cody Clemens, Trevor Larnach, Brooks Lee, maybe Taj Bradley, Yoandres Gomez, even like pre-IL Bailey Ober, I might have put into that spot.
Yeah.
But to me, no one really stands out there in terms of looking at metrics, in terms of looking at WAR, in terms of looking at WPA. WPA would probably say it's Jeffers or Lee in those spots in terms of the impact.
Yeah.
Jeffers for the reasons you discussed, Lee because his middling kind of overall numbers, he's been on fire in any kind of game-changing clutch spot, and so that's really been helpful for them. WPA would also point to Yoandres Gomez as a real impact maker in an otherwise mess of a bullpen, except we're talking about 20 innings from him too. So it's 1-2 is easy. I have no problem putting Jeffers third, but I think it's more in my mind like this 6 or 8 person hodgepodge of all the names I picked there. So I don't even know that there's that much value in trying to go, this guy's third, this guy's fourth.
Right.
I think Jeffers is reasonable. I think Taj Bradley is reasonable, although he hasn't been that effective since coming back off the IL.
Yep.
And I think Gomez is reasonable for the fact that he's been very good in a spot area of the team that has otherwise been like abysmally bad. I think 3 weeks ago I might have made a Clemens argument, but he's sort of slowed down quite a bit. there. Larnick maybe, although he's really a platoon player. There isn't that much like not even breakout, but just guys having really good seasons
I had
to be
I
had.
had I had Jeffers as a half step above the rest of that gang, and then I basically had four guys that I was trying to decipher between those last two
Okay.
spots. Right, the four guys were Clemens, Bradley, Gomez, and Larnick.
Okay.
And that's the end. That is ultimately the way I ended up ranking them. I gave Clemens probably a little extra credit because he's managed to make the rest of the team better by jumping into so
Yep.
many different spots and so on. That I think there is an extra value. That I mean, he's also got a decent WAR. He's got a decent WPA, and then the flexibility I think just sort of ends up being a plus across the team. And so I led them to. I picked Bradley as fifth, but again, it was, the WAR and the WPA are decent. Gomez, I think you could easily make a case for fifth overall. That was probably my toughest one. It was which one I was going to do on fifth or sixth on that one. And then I got Larnick just a step below that. But honestly, if you wanted to make an argument for, it the exact opposite direction. If you wanted to go, no, it's number 4 is Larnick, number 5 is Gomez, number 6 is Bradley, number 7 is Clemens, I'd agree with you. And then beyond that, I get Lee kind of being in that mix because he's just had been so good with, he's delivered so many times when in key situations offensively, but his defense has just been such a problem, and then having to move him around the infield to kind of figure out a spot for him. I would probably put him next. Then we get to sort of like I debated Ober versus Matthews at 9 and 10. Like, I mean, you kind of get into some weird areas at some point here. So.
They've had very few guys. Maybe we talk about this in a second when we talk about biggest disappointments,
right.
And especially that kind of prime age post hype prospect group where you're hoping Lewis or you're hoping Wallner or you were hoping Lee or Martin, Simeon Woods Richardson, Zebby Matthews, that type of group, that kind of 24 to 28-year-old group. Somebody would step forward, and not only haven't any of those guys really stepped forward, Lee and Matthews are probably the closest to that, I would say. Lewis, since he's come back from the minors, obviously, but they've several of them taken big steps backwards. And so when you kind of take that core group and none of them have taken a step forward in terms of consistency, then you are left with a team where it's like, okay, they got 2 all-stars and then they got, I don't know, pick your poison here for 3rd through 7th.
And as nice as it's been for them to be, semi-competitive this year, especially given the American League and so on, I still feel like we're a long ways from sort of like, oh, here's our core for next year. And in fact, if they would have gotten to that point where we felt like we did have a core, like we had 6 positions really disappoint us, but we had like 4 or 5 guys that were young and heading that way. I'd feel a lot better about the season. And frankly, we might actually be in sort of a little more of a wild card spot if we had just that much of an improvement. The guys that we just all talked about, I mean, Bradley could be part of that core. I guess Yoendris Gomez could maybe be part of that core.
Yeah.
But everybody else, I mean, Lee maybe. There's just a lot of maybes as part of the core. I don't know that any of that is much more solved. We feel that is much more settled than we did on opening day.
Well, I agree with that. But what I would say is you found out information about your core.
That's true.
It's just not good information.
It's just not happy information.
What you found out is
right,
Wallner's probably not in the core anymore. What you found out is, Brooksley might be in the core, but it's not going to be at shortstop. There's elements of it that you have found out, but it hasn't been this sort of thing you wanted to find out. But that's part of finding out. If it was all positive, everyone would do it. So, okay, let's move on from the MVP aspect to, I wanted to name like maybe 3 bright spots each and then 3 disappointments each to finish up. We don't have to like rank these or anything. It doesn't need to be that formal, but I know usually we wear tuxedos on the podcast and we're very formal guys in general, which you can see on YouTube, especially. I'm wearing my really nice blue t-shirt today instead of my other 15 blue t-shirts that I wear. So for me, this is similar to the discussion we just had. The biggest bright spots for me are a healthy and thriving Byron Buxton and a healthy and thriving Joe Ryan. Those are the 2 best players on the team. Those guys are going to be all-stars. Without one or both of them performing at this level, this team would be absolutely terrible and unwatchably bad. Um, you know, with Buxton, we talked about all the trade stuff. The Ryan trade speculation is also not going to slow down at any point if this team
Right.
continues to sink towards a seller mindset. But those are the two best players on the team, especially once Lopez went down in spring training. Those guys were both all stars last year. I would expect them to go to another all star game together this year. And just from an enjoyment standpoint, those are the guys carrying this team to whatever it's been carried to at this level. Like, Buxton is tied for the AL lead in homers. He's been banged up, but he hasn't really been injured. And each time he's come back and been great, he's having, I would argue, probably his best offensive season, even if, he's a little bit
Sure.
slower
Yep.
defensively, but he's still quite good defensively. And then Joe Ryan's just doing his usual first half thing, which he pretty much does this every first half.
Yeah.
And it comes on the heels of the elbow scare of like a month or
Yeah.
so ago, where he exited the start, didn't even miss time on the IL, and has been even better. Pretty
Well,
much
and
since.
where you knew you were going to have to lean on him for the entire season.
Yes.
Like as soon as Pablo Lopez went down, you took a look and, well, we've got one pillar left.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, maybe a second. Even that, but even then, even after in spring training, we were like, yeah, I'm not sure I can count on Ober to be one of those pillars. We had one person that we were really hoping would be, be the cornerstone of this rotation for the 2026 season. It was Joe Ryan, and Joe Ryan has absolutely fulfilled those expectations. And that there's something to be said for that. Like there's something to be said for, not putting too much pressure on yourself or continuing to just develop and so on. And he has continued to do that. So
Yeah, I mean, imagine if he wasn't going consistently 6 or 7 innings. Imagine not only what this rotation would look like, but imagine how much worse the bullpen would be if they're needing to cover way more innings than him. Okay, so in terms of other bright spots that I thought, I would like to sit here other than Buxton and tell you there's been hitting bright spots. And yeah, Jeffers pre-injury has been a
Sure.
bright spot. Trevor Larnach has been a bright spot. But what I was looking for more is not just hitters who are doing okay. Ryan Kreidler's been a bright spot, whatever.
sure.
But are there any future looking hitters who have been good? And there is not a single guy on this roster other than Byron Buxton who has an OPS plus of even 100, which means you are an average hitter, and any sort of likelihood to be on the team in 2 years.
Yeah.
Brooks Lee's the closest, but he's been below average, without context into that. Keishel, below average. Wallner, below average. Lewis, below average. On and on and on.
Yeah.
And so to find an offensive bright spot that is not Byron Buxton and is not like a Larnach or a Kreidler or a Jeffers who may or may not be on the team next season, it's hard to find an offensive bright spot, which is not shocking necessarily, but it's shocking within the context of them having the second most runs in the American League. You
Right.
figured there'd be some young upstart, you'd figured, oh wow, Keishel's doing well or Lewis is doing. That just hasn't been the case. So it's hard to find other lineup bright spots like from a future looking bigger picture.
Yeah. This is where we talk about the core, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you there with what we just said. Like as much as I've intrigued by the fact that this team is, battling and so on. I have not seen these and while it looked pretty good, even from a pitching standpoint, like, oh, I see some real promise here for the future early on in April and part of May. I hear some young arms that could maybe make some impacts. I don't see any of that stuff really I don't see any big steps forward from any of those. And maybe that's part of the reason why I'm, craving a Culpepper and a, Jenkins and a Emmanuel Rodriguez and get excited about a Gabby Gonzalez appearance or a Kyler Fedko for that matter appearance. Like, I'm just like, whew,
Kyler Fedko's been on the team, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I know.
You don't need to get excited about he's 0 for 10.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm just saying. I was excited about that. Like, I was just like, oh, hey, yay, we get to see somebody, right?
Yes.
And Marco Raya, hey, look at that.
I would
will
say
go
a
ahead.
bright spot, sort of what you're getting at, on the pitching side at least. There's been like you said, there's been a little bit more of that.
Some flashes. Yeah.
Prelip, I'm not saying he's been perfect, but overall, I think I'm more enthused about Prelip as a future piece than I was before, in part because he's been healthy. He's gone 5+ innings pretty consistently.
Sure.
The swing and miss stuff is there. There's stuff to fix in terms of control and all that, but he's been encouraging ahead of schedule. I think Andrew Morris similar to that. It hasn't been perfect by any means, but I think there's a sign that if they're done with him as a starter and you want to convert him fully to the bullpen, which he's been mostly used in that way for, a couple months now, I think there's absolutely a path for him to be a pretty decent reliever. I think Rojas has shown flashes of upside,
Sure.
whether
Yep.
it's a starter or a reliever, but the stuff is absolutely there. And then Gomez, who we talked about a minute ago, like I'm not saying Gomez is going to be your closer for the next 5 years. He's your closer by default right now because
Right.
that's just where it is. But I at least think he's a nice scrap heap find that you can pencil into next year's bullpen as, one of your setup men at the very least. And so
Right.
this is pretty small stake stuff,
Yep.
but also that's what, 4 or 5 different young-ish, team-controlled,
Sure.
minimum salaried pitchers that you can at least start to fill in the blanks and maybe build a 2027 pitching staff. So that I would say that's a bright spots for me. They're not the biggest bright spots, but Prelip looks pretty good. Morris looks pretty good. Rojas has shown flashes, and then Gomez looks pretty good too.
Yeah. So when you said bright spots in the text message, I took that as sort of the opposite of disappointments. I took it more as like, here's the guys who surprised. Who's the guys who
Okay.
have surprised me a little bit? Not necessarily I see a huge future for them, but these are guys that have had a better year than I was really expecting. And to some extent, I took a look at sort of like, well, where have we been? And also what were specifically my expectations based on like where I drafted them in our 2026 preview draft, right? And the three I came up with I'll give an honorable mention. The honorable mention is Kreidler. I just didn't expect Kreidler to be anywhere near as impactful or as good as he has been. I mean, I knew that he could play good defense, and I think we have seen a little bit of that. Albeit actually not nearly quite as much as I've seen, but he's better in the outfield than I thought he was going to be. But the hitting thing has been a nice breakthrough, and he kind of satisfies both a little bit in a semi bright spot because I feel like he could be on the team 2 years from now. I just don't necessarily see him having a big role, but also he's just exceeded my expectations by a fair amount. The other three that have exceeded my expectations, well, one I had no expectations because he wasn't on the team. That's Gomez, Yolandris Gomez, which you mentioned. Though Larnick also has exceeded my expectations overall in terms of his continued impact, and it helps that was trending the right way about a few days ago with some power, etc. And number one is Cody Clemens. Cody Clemens is just somebody who I think we drafted him, I want to say 15th or 16th in our draft or something like that. And if we were drafting again right now, I think if we were drafting just based on first half results, we would have probably given Cody Clemens a much higher rating. So,
I mean, I don't disagree, but he's a 30-year-old platoon guy with a 109 OPS.
yeah, but I said, I'm not like I was looking at sort of the expectation, how he has performed this year versus what we expected, as opposed to what I view as like, oh, here's the Cody Clemens is the future of the Minnesota Twins. I'm not sure that Cody Clemens is going to be on the Minnesota Twins by next year. So,
yeah, that's fair. I just, he's got a 307 OBP. He's been okay.
But,
I mean, he's the type of guy that speaks more to the team than the player. Like playing every day, he's been a bright spot. I agree. But also, like, we're talking about a journeyman who's kind of doing similar things to last year. He's been slightly better. So, yeah, I see what you're saying there. Let's disappointments. Should we talk about?
It also helps that he's played some center field when they needed center field as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, disappointments, we've got
there's a lot more to
of
choose
them.
from
Yeah.
here. Yeah. So
the
some
question
of them,
is cutting it down to 3.
yeah, some of them we already talked about. I mean, the lack of post-hype, prime-aged former top prospects stepping up. Lewis, Wallner, Lee, Martin, Simeon Woods-Richardson, to some extent, Zebby Matthews. Like, there's probably a couple other names people want to throw in there. I don't really consider Larnick part of that group because he's a little older, a little more experienced. And it doesn't have the future, I think, with the Minnesota Twins. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Larnick's been better than expected. But that group, their inability to produce even like one or two guys taking a big step forward has not only hurt them now, but it changes things for how you view 2027 and beyond. And that's kind of, we were talking about earlier, like you got the information. It's just not the information you want on some of these guys. And I'm not saying you need to push all these guys out. But they're not trending in great directions. And a lot of these guys are in their third, fourth, fifth year with the Twins, and they have less upside now, certainly, but also less dependability now. And as you do look ahead to not only just like the Rodens of the world who are kind of biding their time at AAA, but like legit prospects, Culpepper, Jenkins, hopefully by the end of the season, Rodriguez, Gabriel Gonzalez, on and on. Like at some point you're going to have to make decisions on that type of group. The 25, 26, 27, 28-year-old been around the block a little bit. And I wonder the extent to which they're going to make those decisions surrounding the trade deadline to kind of play both sides of it's time to move on from these guys. They might still have some upside, but also we can clear room for the next wave that we're going to hope to build around. And it's not that they're sure things either, but some of these guys, like, I'll use Wallner as an example. Like, he's not even first in line now for a call up.
Right.
He might be third in line behind Jenkins and Roden at some point. So that's been disappointing because it's not that individually I had super high hopes for any of those guys. I mean, that's kind of the point of putting him in that type of bucket. But you'd hope out of 6 or 7 guys, 1 or 2 of them would step forward, and that's just not been the case.
In our 2026 MVP draft, our third overall pick was Keishel.
Mm-hmm.
He's had a disappointing season. He doesn't make my top 3, and he's had a disappointing season, right? Because number 4 was Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
He's already been sent down to AAA and back up. Now, maybe he's rebounding, but number 6 was Wallner.
Mm-hmm.
He's down to AAA, and we don't know when he'll be back or if he'll be back. And number 9 was Wood Richardson, who's no longer on the team, right?
I mean, it's been ugly.
That's 4 of the top 9 picks that we had for our MVP draft have, three of them have either seen AAA or left the team. And one of them is, now switching positions and, so.
Yeah. The other, I'll fold another disappointment in with that, sort of, is that when it comes to the legit top 100 prospects at AAA, Jenkins, Rodriguez, Culpepper especially, the injuries with them have been so disappointing, not just because it stalls their development, but because it stops them from being able to come to the majors and show something. I mean,
right, yeah.
I'm very convinced if not for the injury, Culpepper would already be in the majors. I think there's a very good chance that if Jenkins had been healthy, he might have been in the majors before Culpepper, or certainly would be in the majors by now at this point, probably playing right field.
Right.
Rodriguez was maybe the one who was going to debut the soonest because he was actually off to a good start. And then he tore his thumb sliding into first base, and he's going to end up missing most of the season.
Yep.
The injuries always suck. And, like the biggest injury was Pablo Lopez. That's obviously been a huge disappointment. But it's not just the injuries hurting the team in the immediate. It's like the injuries have stalled the development and the pushing forward of some of the next wave of guys, so that you're sitting with these disappointing group that we just talked about, but you're not even able to turn the page fully because the guys you would call up to turn the page have all been injured at AAA. So that's been a big disappointment.
It speaks to the lack of bright spots, right? I mean, we were expecting some of those bright spots. In fact, especially you were, right? Like you spent the second half of your MVP draft drafting Jenkins and Emmanuel Rodriguez and,
Well, part of that was because at worst you take a 0 with them. Some of the guys we were drafting, for instance, Simeon Woods Richardson, have produced hugely negative numbers. So in my mind, it was like best case, those guys come up and make an impact. Worst case, I just take a 0.
Right.
Well, maybe you're racking up some negatives. Hasn't really played out that way. But obviously Simeon Woods Richardson, huge disappointment. Just disappointing to see him lose it so fast. I also think the Twins' handling of it was somewhat disappointing. I think they made a bad situation slightly worse with not giving him a real chance to pitch out of the bullpen. I'm sick of hearing the excuse of, well, we just didn't have the ability to use him as a reliever. We couldn't, face pitching shorthanded. Bullshit. Like they've cycled through so many replacement level relievers. Why couldn't you have just used Simeon Richardson in that spot? So that entire thing has been a big disappointment for me.
Yep. Agreed.
And then the last thing that I'll say on the disappointment front is Abel. To some extent, Bradley, just because he hasn't looked the same since his injured list stint, but he's still been decent. But Abel, just, the high of seeing him in those back-to-back starts in April and being like, wow, this guy might be taking the leap to maybe be a frontline starter along with Bradley at the time. And then now to fast forward 2 or 3 months later, and they're both in a much different, much worse spot, especially Abel, obviously with the injury. That's been disappointing too, because in April, it was like, well, no matter what happens, at least these 2 young starting pitchers are looking good. Yeah. And now Bradley's been pretty mediocre for a while now, and Abel is out indefinitely. So that's been a disappointment. Yeah. You got a one I haven't mentioned yet?
The of the 3 we named them, Lewis, Simeon Woods Richardson, Wallner, Keishel I had 4th. I had in sort of like the to be considered disappointing thing. Abel made that list. Bell and Caratini both made that area, and then not to that same extent because I didn't have huge expectations, but I thought they'd be productive. I
I mean,
thought
they've been of late. They've been the
yes,
two best
that's right.
hitters
You're
for
right.
the
You're
last
right.
month
Absolutely.
or so.
You're
But
right.
yes, overall they've been well below
Right. Yeah.
what the Twins thought they were paying for.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, I guess that we did an hour and 50 something minutes, getting back to the point that we could have probably proven at the very beginning. With it's hard to find 3 bright spots,
Yeah.
and it's not hard to find 8 disappointments.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
I think that's
true.
kind of the version that we spent an hour and a half talking about. That's a simplified version of that, and that presents challenges for the second half of how
Right.
do they get better and get in a spot that they can then improve themselves at the deadline, because we're still a month plus away from that.
I think that's the more significant. I think the trade deadline lens is the more significant question,
Yes.
there, which is how optimistic can you be about a run in August and September when you still don't feel like you've got a core that has, hey, we've got something that we can believe in. We've got these bats that are going to come alive that we're going to see big improvements from now. Maybe we do get. I mean, Ray Rice Lewis continues his charge, and Bell continues his charge. Caratini and Jeffers comes back healthy, and Bradley rediscovers his stuff. Like there's enough guys there that have been sort of shown us something at some point, and we just kind of need them to show it more consistently. But I mean, that's always the challenge, right? The challenge is
Right.
always like you can always take a look at the guy's best week and a half and say, oh, we might have something here.
Yeah, consistency has been non-existent for this team.
Right.
And Shelton has talked pretty openly about that. He gave some quotes the other day of like, we can talk about the bullpen, we can talk about the defense, we can talk about all kinds of injuries, all sorts of other stuff. At the end of the day, we need to play better, more consistently. And in his mind, I'm a little skeptical of this view, but this is the manager's mind. They've shown him 3 or 4 different stretches where you go 11-7, you go 11-5, you go 5-1 on the road trip that they just completed. And to him, that's like proof of concept that this team is capable of a lot more, or capable of being a winning team, which is why he's so focused on the consistency, because his viewpoint is if we can play consistently, we can be a winning team, because I've already seen for stretches that we're capable of being a winning team. My thing is you can also view consistently 180 degrees differently.
Right.
Which is that the consistency, the most consistent element of this team has been mediocrity or worse.
Or inconsistency.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
yes, you can point to a
can't
few.
be consistent. Yeah.
If you're clinging to 3 or 4 good stretches, and I don't blame a manager for doing this,
Sure.
and your overall record is 38-44, even though you've had 3 or 4 really good stretches, that tells me that the real consistency is, in the inconsistency, or the real consistency is you're just not that good, right? Like, it's a matter of what's the outlier here. And at 38-44, I'm more inclined to believe that the true level is a losing team, not a winning team. But they're welcome to change that over the next month.
Yep.
They're welcome to put themselves in a position where they're at least 500 at the trade deadline. And then you put pressure on the front office, and you put pressure specifically on the poll lads to put their money where their mouth is and actually add, even if it's just adding a couple relievers. But if you're 10 below 500 at the deadline, nobody's going to add anything, because you're not putting yourself in a spot to do that.
A great time to start that would be when you're facing the dregs of the National League coming to your ballpark for.
We
a home
thought that
series
last
here.
year, coming out of the All-Star break, and
Yep.
then about 12 minutes into the first game of the second half,
That
Chris
is
Paddock
correct.
had allowed 9 runs.
This
or
is
whatever
it.
was.
This is the cleansing breath after that year. That's right.
Okay.
This is
well,
it.
we will
This
be
is how we
back.
break the curse.
We will be back Monday to talk about the Rockies series, good or bad. And in the meantime, thank you, as always, to our presenting sponsor, especially at this point. Like we said, our love to Cooper's family. They have been not just a great sponsor for us and incredibly supportive of the show, but just friends to us.
Okay.
And I think friends to the Twins community, of which, by the way, they're a part of. Huge Twins fans over there.
Right.
And I just, nothing we can say is gonna do that much, but we want to express, our sympathy and love to the family, and our appreciation for getting to know him and the support he gave to the podcast, and probably the thousands of free beers that he gave to John Bonus over the years too.
That's about right, actually. He ended up providing all the beer for my daughter's wedding. So that is thousands is about correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Hang in there, Blackstack, and everybody, please give your thoughts and prayers and best wishes and memories to Blackstack. That will wrap it up for this week. We will be back on Monday with the Patreon to talk about the Rocky series and any other news that breaks. Otherwise, we'll talk to you next Friday. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Cleveland